personal story. Stories that happened to you, or that might have happened to you. Because our lives are really dull. But that doesn't mean that your story can be dull. You need to change the story to make it interesting. I'm going to tell you today about my friend BJ. His real name was Billy Joe. We always called him BJ. Sometimes we called him Beach. Anyway, long ago, when I was a skinny little boy, BJ was a fat little boy. Although Billy Joe was a fat little boy, his parents loved him, and they wanted him to be close to them. So although he could go to school and all that, at play he had to stay in his yard. And if Billy Joe ever got out of his yard, you'd hear that call. You'd hear that call that you could hear throughout the neighborhood. Billy Joe, where are you? And then Billy Joe would get up from his game of marbles. He'd start to run for home, and he'd say, I'm going to get a weapon now. Well, in fact, Billy Joe's yard was a good place to play because he had some big trees that gave a lot of shade, and it was cooler there on the hottest day of the year. We would like to play in Billy Joe's yard. And he had some swings that were with a rope and a tire hanging, and you could get in the tire, you could swing back and forth, and you could swing against the other fellow who was in another swing. You could bounce off each other. It was a lot of fun. But Billy Joe did not have one of those dull monocultural lawns like the rest of us had. Instead, he had a wide variety of native plants that liked to grow in the shade for his lawn. So therefore, you could dig your hole to China anywhere. And we did. Well, actually, that's not entirely true. You could not dig a hole to China anywhere because when the sewer came down our street, it was free, but you had to pay to be connected to it. Now, Billy Joe's parents had a perfectly good operating outhouse out behind the house, and they saw no reason at all to buy an appliance and put it in the house and be connected to the sewer, so they were not connected. But there was a well-worn path from the back door back to the outhouse. And obviously, you couldn't put your hole to China on that path, but maybe nearby. And we did. Now, I must admit, we only got down about 2 feet in the hole to China because we ran into that clay. You've seen that clay, perhaps. The tan clay with the blue streaks in it. It's tough. That clay is really tough. We couldn't make much progress against that clay with the equipment we had to work with. And then, when I was down there in the hole, chipping away at the clay, it seemed kind of hot down there. And I had heard that the center of the earth is very hot, and I thought we might be getting too close. Well, on the day I want to tell you about, we were over there at Billy Joe's for another special reason. It was early evening, getting on to night, and Billy Joe's family was the only one that I knew of that had television. They had a 10-inch circular screen showing moon pictures in beautiful living black and white, as they say. We were over there, of course, at that time, because that's when the wrestling came on. And you had to see the wrestling, obviously. We may have been doing some wrestling ourselves on the floor at Billy Joe's home. Well, suddenly, the door of the downstairs bedroom opened. It was Billy Joe's dad, and he said, "Out, out, everybody out. I'm trying to sleep here." You know, Billy Joe's dad worked for the railroad. He had to sleep at times when other people might be awake. So therefore, we all went out into the yard, but there was stuff to do in the yard too. We could take the hose, and we did take the hose, and wet down a big portion of the yard, and then the earthworms, we call them night crawlers, they would come up to see what was going on. They would come up and you could catch them. Well, you could catch them if you were fast, because when you walked toward the earthworm with your little flashlight looking for him, you could feel the vibrations in the ground, and he would zip back down into his hole, and you couldn't catch him then, but if you were careful, you could catch him, and you could get that worm, and you could pull on him. Now, that worm had lived underground all of his life. He had no desire at all to see the world above ground. He liked his home, and therefore he would throw out his anchor. You probably didn't know earthworms had anchors. See, you could learn stuff coming to storytelling. He would throw out his anchor, and he just wouldn't come, and you just couldn't pull him out. But you'd pull on that worm, and he would get thinner and thinner in the body, and then all of a sudden, pop! And you had two worms. Well, that did not disturb us very much, because we had heard that earthworms can reproduce from pieces. And we thought we were just participating in their reproductive process. We thought we were doing our part. Anyway, pulling on earthworms is a lot of fun, but that doesn't last forever. So it was another thing we could do over at Billy Joe's house. Billy Joe's dad brought home fireworks, and they were not the kind of fireworks that we had. There was none of those sparklers or pinwheels. They were actually cherry bombs. Billy Joe's dad brought home cherry bombs. We had heard that if you take a cherry bomb, put it inside a tin can and smash the can around it with a little place for the wick to come out, that it'll make a bigger bang. Obviously, this had to be tested. That's what we did. We put the cherry bomb in the tin can, smashed it around, the wick was out there, we lit the wick, and we threw it into the hole to China. This was the precursor of what is now known as underground testing. But then something happened that I was not really prepared for. The back door of the house opened, and it was Billy Joe's dad running down that path to the outhouse, running as fast. He was really making time. I didn't know that big people could run that fast. And I didn't know that big people sometimes slept in their long johns. But he was really, really making time down to that outhouse until he came to the muddy spot, which mud had been created by our earthworm activity. And he flew into the air, and his arms were working so fast that I thought he was gaining altitude for a while. But then the cherry bomb went off. Ow! Then Billy Joe's dad hit the mud flat on his back. Ow! Now I'm going to draw the curtain across the chaotic scene that occurred next. But I do remember that as I ran for home as fast as I could, I heard that call, "Billy Joe, where are you?" Well, now we'll talk about the story. There was a hole to China. I have dug holes to China every once in a while. We never got very far. We did hit that. But Billy Joe's parents did not keep him from going other places. But it makes a better story. What you have to do is you have to see the scene. You see the scene in your mind.